Hi, this is Mark from Top Local. We're here with Bernie Pawlik. We're going to talk cars. So we're talking about a 2007 Audi Q7 that had an engine oil leak repair. How you doing, Bernie?
I'm doing really well this morning.
So what was going on with this Audi SUV?
Well, this vehicle came to us with an engine oil leak, and it was quite an oil leak when the engine running. There'd be, every minute there'd be maybe every couple of minutes there'd be a drip on the ground. So it's a pretty substantial leak. Did a diagnostic, and we found that the leak was coming from the upper engine oil pan.
Okay, that sounds like a pretty serious leak and problem. What was involved in fixing it?
Well, there was a lot involved, and actually, you're right. It is a pretty serious leak. Serious in terms of the complexity of the leak and also the complexity of the repair. The upper oil pan basically requires removing the engine from the vehicle and dismantling an awful lot of the engine just to take the oil pan off to make the repair.
Okay, that sounds a little extreme. Is the oil pan gasket a typical gasket that seals the entire bottom end of the vehicle?
No, it's a little different, and this is kind of common on modern engine technology. The parts are aluminum, so they fit the pan together with usually a high quality. I wouldn't call it silicone, but it's like a silicone type sealer. It's a form of gasket material, and then in any areas of crucial oil flow, they'll put O-rings. So there's 4 O-rings, and then the rest of it is this silicone type sealer, special sealer. Which they use in a number of gaskets. The timing chain covers, the lower oil pan is the same thing. But that's how most modern engines are sealed nowadays. The typical big, huge, gasket, or well, in the olden days, like a cork gasket, those are long gone now.
So does it really need to be so complicated?
Well, I don't know if it needs to be, but it is. And when you're driving an Audi, people buy them because you want the performance, you want the fuel economy. And this way modern, and of course with emissions on engines, it's just created a storm of complication. But I mean, the good news is you can hop in your vehicle stone cold, it runs great, works perfectly. The performance cold and hot is the same, whereas back, go back 20, 30 years ago, with carbureted engines, you'd be stalling and stumbling and, until the engine warmed up. So not to mention the amount of pollutants you put out. So there's a lot of complexity. I'm going to share some photos here. We've got lots of them to look at. So let's start with, here's our oil leak. You can see that okay, Mark?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so this is a view of the bottom of the engine. Looking up, this area over here, this is the crankshaft pulley and this serpentine drive belt. And right where the red arrow is pointing, that's where our oil leak was coming from. So this assembly right here, this is the upper engine oil pan. And down here is the lower oil pan. Lower oil pan, by the way, can be replaced inside the vehicle, but the upper is a much more deeply buried component, let's say. So so that's where our leak was. This is what we viewed in the engine. Once we pulled the engine out, is another view of the kind of head on. This is the seam of the upper oil pan right here. And so that's where, that's, again, you can see the leak. The oil's pouring down out of here, down here, as the engine was running. So let's look at complexity. There's the back view of the engine. These are the timing chains in the engine. I mean, this is like a really, really complicated setup with a lot of bits and pieces. Fortunately for our client, everything seems to be in pretty good order, but there are a lot of parts and pieces that can wear here, a lot of money. So you basically here, there's the crankshaft. So this is where it kind of all starts turning from. You've got chains here driving the oil pump drive. Then you've got chains here. This is the main chain that drives the camshaft gears. And then you've got chains that drive the camshaft. And these are the variable valve timing phasers. There are solenoids up here. So there's a lot that goes into this to make this engine run like the beautiful engine it does. But as you can see, there's a lot of complexity here. What else have we got here? There's a view of the here's a view of the vehicle. To pull this engine out, you basically pull a whole front cradle out with the transmission, the transfer case, and the engine. So that's the assembly sitting on jack stands after it's removed, and the body of the vehicle sitting up above. Almost looks somewhat like our Ford 6-liter type of jobs that we do. Now, one comment, so here's our lower engine oil pan. So this is sort of what the unit looks like, cleaned up and mostly cleaned up and ready to be reinstalled. A nice, very precise piece of machine, precision machine piece of equipment. And yeah, so now one area of problem on these Audis, these engines are fairly reliable, but there's one problem area, and that is the intake manifold. Inside the intake manifold, there are runners to change the airflow inside the intake manifold. Again, this is what gives the engine the performance that it has. There's a set of runners here right by the intake ports. There's a set of runners here, and then inside the manifold there's a set of runners that change as well. There's actuators over here which are electronically controlled. And when we took this manifold out, there was actually some broken pieces that fell out. Unfortunately, they never fell into the engine. We'll be able to retrieve them. But this is part of the flapper inside the manifold that's broken. Now, this is actually a fairly common breakage problem on these engines. Sometimes it can result in pieces actually falling into the engine and causing problems. So this is something we'll have to address with this repair. It's expensive. Unfortunately, you have to buy a complete manifold, and it seems to only be available from Audi. So yeah, so there's a picture show of, let's close this down here so I can.
Yeah, we got you again.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So there's a view of the complexity and some of the things. One of the things that goes wrong, a couple of things, and there we have it.
So looking at the back end of that engine kind of reminded me of a throwback to looking at an old V12 Ferrari engine with dual overhead cams.
Yeah. Same complexity. You don't need. You can have that same level of complexity even in a Kia nowadays.
So how are these vehicles overall?
They're pretty good. I mean, it's an Audi. It's more expensive to maintain, of course. There's things that wear out that faster than you'll find on a lot of other cars. It's big. It uses a fair bit of fuel. Very nice vehicle. Overall, pretty reliable, but there are some areas of issues, and we're going to discuss that in a future hangout.
All right, so we've been talking with Mr. Bernie Pawlik, Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver. If you need service on your Audi from experts who know what they're doing, Bernie, turn down the volume. You're echoing like crazy. Hi, so we're Pawlik Automotive, 604-327-7112, or check out their website, pawlikautomotive.com. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.